The rain had been falling for hours, turning the city into a slick, shivering mess of neon and shadows. Detective Adrian Cole stood under the brim of his fedora, watching the drops slide off and spatter against the cracked pavement. The alley reeked of blood, though the storm tried its best to wash it away. The victim was young. Female. Maybe 22. Her body lay crumpled against the graffiti-stained wall like a discarded doll. But it wasn't the death that made Adrian's stomach turn, it was the precision. The cuts were neat. Surgical. Almost ritualistic. "Another one," muttered Officer Ramirez, his voice muffled behind the mask he wore. "Third this month." Adrian crouched beside the body. The girl's eyes were still open, staring at nothing, her lips parted as if trying to say something she never got the chance to finish. In her hands, clutched so tightly the knuckles had turned bone white, was a small, leather-bound book. Adrian reached out with gloved hands, prying it free. The cover was worn, stained darker in places as if soaked in something old. Embossed into the leather, almost burned into it, was a single word, ledger. "What the hell is that?" Ramirez asked. Adrian didn't answer. He flipped it open. The first page was blank. So was the second. But by the third, there was writing, lines upon lines of names, each followed by a date. Some of the ink was faded, some fresh as if written just hours ago. And the last name on the list made Adrian's breath hitch. Emily Ross. The date beside it, tonight. It was the victim's name. The coroner arrived to bag the body, but Adrian couldn't shake the chill crawling along his spine. He tucked the ledger into an evidence bag and stepped back into the rain. Something was wrong with the city. He could feel it pressing against him, like the air itself wanted him to turn back. But Adrian had been a detective too long to listen to fear. As he lit a cigarette with shaky hands, Ramirez came up behind him. "You think this is the butcher?" Adrian exhaled smoke, the word tasting bitter. "The butcher's just a story. A ghost we scare rookies with. Then who's carving people up like this?" Adrian didn't answer. He was staring at the evidence bag. The ledger. Because in the faint reflection of the rain-slick streetlight, he swore he saw letters moving across its pages, like the ink was still writing itself. And though he told himself it was just his imagination, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that the book was aware of him. Watching him. Waiting. That night, he placed the ledger on his desk at home. The rain hadn't stopped. The storm battered the windows like fists trying to break in. He sat in silence, staring at the leather cover. Finally, curiosity won. He opened it again. There were more names now. Not just victims. Not just strangers. He flipped faster, pages fluttering beneath his hands until he saw it. Adrian Cole. Tomorrow's date. The cigarette fell from his lips and burned out on the desk. The morgue was always too cold. Sterile white walls, humming fluorescent lights, the metallic smell of disinfectant trying to smother the coppery stench of death. Detective Adrian Cole hated this place, but tonight the chill seemed to sink deeper than ever, like the cold wasn't just in the room, it was inside him. Dr. Evelyn Harper adjusted her gloves and pulled the sheet back from the victim's body. Emily Ross lay pale and stiff under the harsh lights, her eyes mercifully closed now. The girl looked smaller in death, almost fragile, but the wounds carved into her flesh told another story. These cuts weren't made with a kitchen knife, Harper said, her voice clinical but tinged with unease. Too precise. Clean edges, no hesitation marks. Adrian nodded. He'd seen messy killings, crime of passion, rage, desperation. This was different. This was practiced. Harper continued, the interesting part is the absence of blood. Adrian frowned. Absence? She pointed to the Y-shaped incision she'd made. Most of the blood was drained before death. Very little internal bleeding. Whoever did this knows anatomy. Maybe even medicine. Ramirez, standing stiff at Adrian's side, muttered, so we're looking for a surgeon? Harper shook her head. Or someone who's studied it closely enough to mimic one. But there's something else. She reached for a small evidence tray. On it sat a folded scrap of paper, stained around the edges. We found this in her stomach. Adrian leaned closer. It was a torn piece of parchment, the texture rougher than modern paper, as though centuries old. Scrawled across it in faded ink were 3 words. You will follow. Ramirez cursed under his breath. Adrian's pulse hammered in his ears. He remembered the ledger. How the names shifted when he looked away. How his own name had appeared. He didn't tell Ramirez or Harper about it, not yet. If he did, they'd think he was losing his mind. But deep down, Adrian was beginning to believe the butcher wasn't just a man. He was something older. Something patient. Hours later, Adrian left the morgue, lighting another cigarette beneath the orange glow of a street lamp. The storm had passed, leaving the city slick and empty, reflections of neon dancing in shallow puddles. He stood there for a moment, trying to steady his nerves. That's when he felt it. Someone was watching him. He turned sharply, scanning the street. Nothing. Just an empty stretch of wet asphalt, trash cans knocked over by the storm, a flickering sign buzzing above a closed diner. He exhaled smoke, forcing himself to relax. Paranoia, he told himself. That's all. But when he slid into his car, he noticed something on the passenger seat. Another scrap of parchment. He picked it up with trembling fingers. The ink was still wet. Tomorrow. Midnight. Another. Back at his apartment, Adrian poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, though it did little to calm his shaking hands. He placed the parchment beside the ledger on his desk. Together, they looked like relics of something ancient, something that shouldn't exist in this city, in this time. Against his better judgment, he opened the ledger again. The pages were fuller now. Dozens of new names, all dated within the last month. Names he didn't recognize, but maybe Harper's files would. Then he saw it. At the bottom of the page. Victor Ramirez. Tomorrow's date. Midnight. Adrian's stomach dropped. His partner. The ledger wasn't predicting deaths, it was recording them before they happened. He slammed the book shut, breath ragged. There had to be a way to stop it. There had to be. A knock at the door. Adrian froze. It was nearly midnight. Nobody visited at this hour. The knock came again. Slower. Heavier. He approached the door quietly, hand resting on the grip of his revolver. He didn't open it. Instead, he looked through the peephole. Nobody was there. But just as he stepped back, a shadow flickered across the hall light, something impossibly tall, moving too smoothly to be human. And then he heard it. A voice, low and rasping, whispering through the crack of the door. Detective, we're almost ready. Detective Adrian Cole barely slept. The ledger sat on his desk like a living thing, whispering to him in the silence of his apartment. He had tried locking it in a drawer, even stuffing it into a closet, but no matter where he hid it, he swore he could still hear the faint scratching of ink filling its pages. And Ramirez's name haunted him. Tomorrow. Midnight. It was nearly dusk now, the city already painted in bruised shades of purple and black. Adrian gripped his revolver and shoved the ledger into his coat pocket. If the book wanted to taunt him, then he'd use it as bait. The call came at 11:47 p.m. Another body. The address wasn't far, a half-abandoned apartment complex on the east side, where addicts and squatters carved out their lives among peeling wallpaper and broken lights. Adrian drove fast, sirens wailing, Ramirez riding shotgun, unaware that his name was already written in death. "Say Memo?" Ramirez asked, breaking the tense silence. Adrian clenched his jaw. "We'll see." He didn't dare tell him. How could he? "Hey, partner, some cursed book says you're next in line." No, Ramirez wouldn't believe him, and worse, he might laugh. When they arrived, the building loomed like a decaying skeleton. Half the windows were boarded, others cracked and dark. Police tape fluttered in the night wind, and 2 uniforms stood guard at the entrance, pale-faced and uneasy. "Top floor," one muttered. Adrian and Ramirez climbed the stairs, each step creaking like bones snapping underfoot. The smell hit them first. Iron. Copper. Rot. The body was sprawled in the middle of the room, blood smeared across the cracked linoleum in a grotesque spiral pattern. The victim was male, maybe mid-30s, eyes wide open, chest carved with symbols that Adrian couldn't recognize. And in the dead man's hand, another page from the ledger. Adrian's stomach dropped. He knelt down, prying the parchment free. This one had only 2 words, written in that same jagged, ancient ink. "He follows." Ramirez frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" Adrian didn't answer. His eyes drifted to the spiral of blood. It wasn't random. It was a path, curling inward, leading directly toward the body. Like an invitation. As the forensic team worked the scene, Adrian stepped into the hallway, lighting a cigarette with shaking fingers. He pulled the ledger from his coat, flipping it open. The pages turned by themselves. He froze, watching as fresh ink slithered across the parchment, curling into words as though an invisible hand were writing them. Victor Ramirez. Tonight. Midnight. Adrian's heart lurched. He checked his watch. 11:59. "Ramirez," he shouted, rushing back into the room. His partner looked up, confused, just as the overhead light sputtered and died. Darkness swallowed them whole. Then came the sound. A dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the floorboards. The stench of rot thickened, pressing against Adrian's lungs. "Stay close." Adrian barked, fumbling for his revolver. But when he turned toward Ramirez's silhouette, something moved behind him. Tall. Wrong. Its limbs too long, head tilted at an impossible angle. Eyes glinting pale in the dark. Ramirez didn't even have time to scream. The shadow wrapped around him, pulling him backward into the spiral of blood. His body convulsed, swallowed by the darkness, until all that remained was silence. The lights flickered back on. The room was empty. Ramirez was gone. Only his badge remained, lying in the center of the spiral. Adrian staggered forward, chest heaving. The ledger slipped from his coat and landed beside the badge. The pages fluttered open, and at the very bottom, a fresh line of ink appeared. Victor Ramirez. Dead. 12 a.m. And beneath it, another name. Adrian Cole. Tomorrow. Midnight. Adrian stared, paralyzed. His name was no longer just written, it was carved into the page, the letters deep, as though burned into the leather itself. He felt something shift in the air, like unseen eyes leaning closer. Watching. Waiting. And in that moment, Adrian realized the truth. The ledger wasn't a record of murders. It was a script. And he was just another line waiting to be read. The slaughterhouse reeked of rust and old blood. Chains dangled from the rafters, swaying gently as if moved by breath that wasn't there. Detective Adrian Cole walked slowly down the cracked concrete floor, revolver drawn, every step echoing like a funeral drum. The ledger was heavy in his coat pocket, almost burning against his side. He knew this was where it wanted him to be. Where the story had always been leading. "Come out," Adrian called, his voice hoarse. "I know you're here." Silence. Then, movement. From the shadows, a figure emerged. At first glance, it looked human, tall, wearing a blood-stained butcher's apron, face hidden by a cracked porcelain mask. But as it drew closer, Adrian saw the truth. The arms were too long, the fingers jointed wrong, like hooks instead of hands. And behind the mask, two pale, lidless eyes glowed faintly. The butcher. Adrian steadied his gun. "You're not taking me." The butcher tilted its head, voice rasping like knives dragged across stone. "You were written long before you were born." It reached into the darkness and held up something small. Adrian's blood turned cold. It was Ramirez's badge, now cracked in half. "No," Adrian muttered, taking a step back. His hand trembled on the gun. The butcher lowered the badge, then stretched out its hand toward him. In its palm lay the ledger. Adrian's ledger. But this one wasn't leather-bound anymore. Its cover writhed like living skin, veins pulsing beneath the surface. The pages flapped open in a violent wind that wasn't there, and Adrian saw his name at the bottom. Adrian Cole. Tonight. Midnight. He checked his watch. 11:59. 1 minute left. "No," he whispered. "I decide when I die. Not you. Not your cursed book." Adrian raised his revolver and fired. The bullet ripped through the butcher's mask, shattering porcelain into the dark. But what lay beneath wasn't a face. It was a gaping maw of teeth, rows upon rows, stretching into infinite blackness. The butcher did not fall. It did not bleed. It simply stepped closer. Adrian fired again. And again. 6 shots in total, each one swallowed by the darkness inside that inhuman grin. Click. Empty. The butcher was inches away now, lowering the ledger into Adrian's shaking hands. Its voice slithered into his ear. "Every story must have an ending, detective. Write it." Adrian looked down. The ledger was open to a blank page, the ink quill already forming in his hand, slick and cold as bone. He tried to resist, but his body betrayed him. His fingers moved, scrawling letters that burned as they appeared. Adrian Cole. Dead. 12 a.m. The clock struck midnight. The chains rattled. The lights died. And Adrian Cole's scream was the last sound the slaughterhouse ever heard. Days later, the police found the building empty. No body. No killer. Only the ledger, sitting on the blood-stained floor. Its last page had already turned. And there, In fresh black ink, was a new name. Detective Evelyn Harper. Tomorrow. Midnight.